Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And it's Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. And splatter and
Boom,
crunching
splatter.
and melting
that.
faces. We're doing Dredd.
We're doing Dredd.
2012's Dredd. I know that the 95 movies like Judge Dredd. We skipped that one.
Yeah.
Mostly because I forgot about it on it, if I'm being honest.
You know what? Yeah, the funny thing is, like, I have never actually watched the original Judge Dredd.
Neither have I.
And it's one of those things where I'm like, uh-oh. And so that's exciting because that's inspired me and Stacy to have like a cheesy 90s action movie kind of stuff. So I'm looking forward to True Lies and stuff like that coming up. But
see,
yeah,
I
never
like
watched
True
the
Lies.
original Dredd. Yeah, I love True Lies. True Lies.
I haven't rewatched it in a while, and I've heard other people who've rewatched it like very problemac. Like
I'm 100% sure about all of the films we used to watch.
But yeah, I never got to see the original Judge Dredd. I think my parents saw it without me, and I remember I had a babysitter who'd seen it, and she just kept talking about it, and I was like, I'm fucking angry about not being able to see Judge Dredd. And then this came out, I'm like, I'm an adult, I can watch this. I don't know why I never thought to just watch the Sylvester Stallone one, but I
honestly,
never have.
Honestly, that is my same reaction when I was like, it was like, oh, we're watching Dredd, and then Stacy was like, oh yeah, we're watching Dredd with Stallone. I'm like, no, with Carl Urban. And then he was like, and then she was like, we're not watching the original. I'm like, to be honest, I've never watched the original, and that was like an offensive thing for her.
We definitely missed that one.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess we'll have to go back, and this episode's going to be riddled with like inaccuracies.
I just want to tell everyone that I'm
not. Yeah, I'm not referencing the first one whatsoever. I'm going to keep my foot out of my mouth and not reference the first one. That is the warning.
So this one.
Oh, that's fun, because on this episode of Spoiled Rotten, you can spoil it for us.
I guess so. Yeah, you could comment and be like, what about this? What about the reference to that? But I have no point of reference other than, was it Rob Schneider who was in it? I can't remember who his sidekick was. But anyway, the point is, no more referencing the first one. We are here to talk about Carl Urban, what's his name? Wood Harris, and Lena Headey, or Headey. I never know how to pronounce her last name.
I never know how to pronounce her name too.
Olivia Thirlby. These are people in this movie, and we can talk about that. My memory of this movie was, what a fun movie. And I think that's because I saw it in theaters, and even rewatching it on Netflix, you're like, yeah, this is really shot to like highlight the 3D aspects of it, like all the slow-mo stuff, but which is the drug, not slow motion stuff, the slow-mo stuff, but even like certain ways they frame things, and like if they're in a car, the way it's shot, it's clearly meant for you to like enjoy that in 3D, which I didn't get to do. So that was a layer taken away. And also I just remember being like, yeah, this is the Raid, but with comic book characters that we know and without the fun like fight choreography, because it's mostly just shooting people and pushing them around.
Yeah, and like complete disregard for life and all that kind of stuff. Like
which I think is the point, but I feel like they didn't. Maybe this is me asking for it to be more obvious. Like, I understand the whole point of the Anderson character, the like Olivia Thirlby, is supposed to be like, well, she would be better at this because she actually knows people's intentions and can read their minds and doesn't look at this as black and white. Like, she is like there to actually understand people.
So I actually got the impression that the debate for her character was whether or not she could actually do the judge job, right? She's been told,
it's set up for her to believe, oh well, you aren't good enough for this. That's how she's going into it feeling. But the movie, I think, makes a point of like, well, she can't be a part of this organization. It's the John Blake thing. Like,
Mhm.
she's too good for this. Like, anybody who thinks that there's like shortcomings from her is really a reflection of their shit at their job. She would
Correct.
actually be good, but she actually realizes, well, I don't want to be a part of this at the end. That's why she gives back the badge at the end. And Judge Dredd is like, well, she passed. Like, she was good at it. But like, I
She
think
doesn't want to do it. Yeah.
she doesn't want to do it. And as the audience, you should be like, good. Like, you would never, like, you,
Yep.
this could only serve for you to become like Judge Dredd, which you shouldn't be like.
Yeah. In which case, like that 1% that they're talking about, like where she's like 99% accurate or whatever. Because it was my impression actually that they desperately wanted to push her through the Judge Dredd program so that she can use her telepathic finding reading
Totally.
like things to like really come down on crime.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think like that, and when they realized that, when she realized that this is what my life is gonna be, I'm gonna be hunting down people, you know, in issuing sentences and all that kind of stuff. And you know, I don't think I think it was one of those really good commentaries where it was a good commentary on the legal system of being like, oh, this is what you think it is. No, this is what it actually is, and it's bullshit, and it's crazy, and it's violent, and it's just one person is judged like, you know, it's crazy. Like,
I think
you know,
we can see that. I don't know if the movie successfully lands that idea.
no, it doesn't. The
I
movie
think the
doesn't
movie is
successfully
way
land.
too concerned with showing you cool, like gory things happening for
Oh
me to
yeah, it's
believe that
crazy.
like
Yep.
the actual takeaway is this is bad. Like, I think the whole movie is just trying to be like, isn't this fun? Like,
So my impression, and that's the funny thing is, I wanted to get your impression of what the takeaway is. My takeaway was a little bit of what I originally just said with that character being like, yeah, I this is, if this is what you guys actually do, I don't want any part of it. This is just whatever, it's fucked up. Or whether or not it's going to say that there's only one Judge Dredd, like only Dredd can do this job well and not corrupt. You know what I mean? In the sense where
that's why I think the movie is mixed, because I think you're right that people could walk away from it being like, well, yeah, like there can only be one Judge Dredd. Like, he's the only one that won't be corrupt. But like, I wouldn't want to be Judge Dredd. I would
no, I
hate,
wouldn't.
like, at one point he's like, well, they are pointing guns at an officer, so that's like they're guilty, like we can kill them. And I know at one point when they're kids, he's like, well, I'll just stun them, but it's still like, geez, like
it's still
like,
a very extreme response to a situation. It's very, like you said, black and white. His thinking is very, very black and white. I'm sure like the kids that caught him cornered with the guns, he probably assessed that situation of being like, oh, I'm pretty sure there was some sort of law of like, oh, they're under 18, you can't execute anyone under 18, so I'm going to use this stun. I'm sure what he was doing at that point in time was more along following the books as opposed to what and I keep forgetting her name at this.
Anderson.
Anderson. And what Anderson does with the tech guy, I can't remember his name.
Who, Donald Gleason?
Yeah, yeah, Donald Gleason.
General Hux.
Hux, that's what it was. What she does with that guy was absolutely awesome. It was like, no, he's not a perp. He's a victim. He's this. He's this. He's this. I'm permitted to pass judgment until the end of this thing. I'm well aware that I've already failed, but I'm still passing judgment until you give me final whatever. And then the fact that Dredd was like, yeah, that's good reason. That's good rationale. I'm going to let that happen, kind of deal. Like, because at that point she's right. Like, based on Dredd's kind of assessment matrix, I guess, she already failed. She already did. You got taken captured, and like the gun was taken away from her and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing is, even those kids were like, most people in that building that they were beating on are also victims.
Oh yeah,
like
absolutely.
That was nice that they were like had mercy on the white guy that was like, oh please, I'm just here behind the computer. But like all those other people, that's the problem with the movie. That's why I'm like, it's not that good of a commentary. Is that like,
it's not a good commentary.
The reasoning should be for more than just the white guy behind the computer, that like that you understand the circumstances that got them there and don't feel the need to beat up on him. Like, that should have been extended. that was a moment for those kids to get that same courtesy.
Yeah.
That like, and I
And
understand that
people, whether or
there
not
are
they-
people there that just want to beat up on them, but like
Oh, yeah.
most of the people living in that building, the whole point is that there used to be 3 gangs keeping everybody scared and in check, and now there's one person who was able to take down the other 2, and she's got this iron fist on all of them. So
Mhm.
yeah, they need to do her bidding. And in addition to needing to do her bidding, they probably are like, what the fuck anyway? Like, you're not the law here anyway. She's the law.
Mhm.
We like, you're just causing trouble for us. Get out of here.
Yep. And that's exactly what it seems like more than anything else, because I like the beginning of the dialogue where it's like when they're where Dredd is like getting Anderson and he's being briefed on what the assignment is and that they have to go to Peachtree. And I love the fact that it's like everyone has said is like, why has this been allowed to happen when they're getting the briefing for the gang thing?
Mhm.
And then Dredd is like, no judge has been willing to go there. And he's like, well, not until now. And that's just like the ultimate form of cheesiness. It's
Mhm.
so cheesy. And I'm like, okay, good. Because apparently what was good about the first one was the cheesiness. So I'm like, I don't know if it successfully delivers on that. I can't comment on it, but there was definitely cheese throughout this whole thing, splattered liberally with like gratuitous violence.
Didn't really work for me, but yeah,
I gotta admit, the gratuitous violence did not work for me whatsoever.
no.
I don't know if I'm getting to an age where I'm like, I don't want to see that anymore, or if I see it, I want there to be a point to the violence. This is just a complete disregard of life, and I don't know.
Yeah,
If
like
that's,
I feel like if anything, that not gratuitous, the excessive violence should have been on the judges that like were
yeah,
the corrupt
correct.
ones.
I felt like the gratuitous violence would have been well used with Mama as well as the corrupt judges. And that should have been it. I felt like there should have been a very, very big distinction between Judge Dredd and how he acted and Anderson. But of course, the issue there is arguably everything that Judge Dredd does is in self-defense. So you can just say that he was good at his job or whatever, but it was like just gratuitously violent. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was too much, and I think my to be fair, I kind of zoned out. So like I wasn't that committed to and I think it's not because you don't see his face, but I do think there is something to, especially in this movie where they highlight like I'm not going to talk about the first movie. I know he takes his mask off in the first movie, but I think in this movie, the fact that he's constantly got his mask on, and at one point I didn't remember which one he was of the corrupt or Carl Urban. Like they had to really focus on him. It made me just automatically be like, well, he's not a real character, and like you just have Judge Anderson.
Yep.
And it's weird because, as we said, that might just speak to our sensibilities that we are glomming on to Judge Anderson more because she is the one that's actually trying to connect and like make real assessments instead of just like, no, you have a gun, so illegal, I can kill you now and get this over with. She's actually like, wait, no, like her husband was the person we just shot the hot shot into his head and melted his face. Like we should think about what we're doing here and stuff. Like she's paying attention, but then you contrast that with like the comic accurate, cool, like Carver never takes off his helmet. He just there, he kicks everyone's ass and like he gets the job done. And you're like, I don't know what the movie is actually trying to get accomplished.
Yeah,
that's
my thing too. Is I asked myself after watching this movie, is the point of Anderson's character to soften Dredd, which it does not do, or is it the point of Anderson's character to just put some moral challenge up to Dredd, which it does not succeed because Dredd stays Dredd by the end of the movie, right? And all he
other
does
than I think she softens him because she's like, well, yeah, she passed. Like I think he sees the merit in the way she operates, which
you're right,
which he didn't care about before.
That is true. That is true. She does soften him to the degree where he does pass her, but it's a more of a symbolic gesture at that point because she's already like, I quit. She's like, oh yeah.
No, because if it was, I don't think it's symbolic because he's saying, yeah, she passed, which she's not gonna. I mean, for what we know, she won't be working there. She left, but it means that he now acknowledges those that way of operating as valid, and maybe we think he will carry that on moving forward. So it is a significant thing for him to say that. I what I think is weird about it is that it's like that still centers him as like the hero, whereas I feel like it's more of a journey for Anderson than it is for Dredd. Like he's not going on a journey. He's there to do his job, and then he's like, "Huh, maybe I'll do that later. Maybe I could."
Yeah.
Like, and then I don't have to work with a mutant. Great. This actually worked out for me.
This is very much like a Denzel Washington, Ethan Hawke Training Day vibe kind of deal, but of course, like in the sense where that movie does commentary so much more successfully and all that kind of stuff. And so much more successfully, but this is obviously not trying to be that. I'm just drawing out the parallels of like we have one person, a veteran cop, and then a rookie cop, and that's a story. We're always finding the rookie cop as driving force for the story, because for the veteran cop, it's another day on the job, right? But for the rookie cop, it's a learning, it's a test, it's all these different things. So we're naturally drawn towards Anderson, absolutely. But not only that, but visually too. And this is what I found very, very interesting about this. The idea that they made a point to be like, oh, she's not going to wear a helmet because it's going to interfere with her ability to read minds. And I like what Dredd said. It's like, well, I think a bullet's going to interfere with your ability to read minds more. But it's just when it comes down to that fight scene, when you have the 4 other corrupt judges coming in and trying to be the muscle, you disconnect because there's visually nothing different between Carl Urban and the guy that he has to fight and figures it out. Like the only thing interesting about that scene was like, oh, this is how he figures out that they're corrupt, and that's about it. And it's just like, oh, okay, that's just dialogue that driven. And if he didn't pick up on that, you'd be like, well, why do we like Judge Dredd? He's dumb. So he did the absolute minimum there. It was not an interesting scene. It could have been, but it's just one of those things where because visually they were the exact same point at that point. Like, show Dredd with some wear and tear, some like scratches on his helmet or something like that, compared to the other guys, because I didn't even know who was fighting who at that point in time.
That was the problem I had too.
Yeah,
I think that's also because I wasn't really paying attention, because I didn't. That wasn't my memory from seeing it in theaters. In theaters, right. I felt like I was way more locked in and I understood everything that was going on. This time, I just remember feeling like, I think it was like 7 minutes, and I was like, "Oh, we're in trouble," because I just don't care.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where I think my theater experience of this movie was obviously locked in because A, I hate bringing out a phone in the theater, because only assholes do that, and B, I think the idea of like wearing those plastic 3D glasses, which I miss. I never thought I'd say that, but I miss right now because that means I'm in a theater. That just kind of pulls you in. And you're right. Like this movie, even looking at the movie poster on Wikipedia right now, it's advertised as Dredd 3D. And like the interesting thing is on Netflix, where I watched it, it was just Dredd, right? So it's clearly like it's not a movie that will translate well to the home theater unless you have the 3D equipment, which of course home theater systems are moving away from. So it is a very, very specific experience that you hope to get out of this movie, and it is a very Michael Bay-esque visual driven thing only, and that visual immersion.
Well, it's not Michael Bay-esque. I know what you you mean
in regards to
it's not, it doesn't look like a Michael Bay movie.
You're right. What I'm saying is like the flash and the flare. It's a movie that's meant to be more, you're compelled by the flash and the flare as opposed to the story and the characters or anything like that, is how I feel.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Like, even as you said, like, oh, there's no difference between Dredd and them. I'm like, I now feel like maybe that is intentional, that you're like, yeah, like Anderson is different from all of these people, and that's why she's not gonna like stick around with them. And like, even the hero Dredd blends in with the bad guys at a certain point. Like, I can start to be like, is that on purpose? Like, is that like, am I reading too much into it? Or that's the thing. I'm not asking rhetorically. I genuinely don't know like what this movie is trying to accomplish, because there are moments where I'm just like, well, he just seems like all the rest of them, and they're corrupt, yes, but it doesn't. They're corrupt working for one bad guy, whereas I also see Dredd as a bad guy, like for his lack of compassion and actually trying to make things better. Like he's not there to make things better. He's there to just like
He's there to
like
reinforce a system.
yeah, and that's the thing. That is more a function of police than it is than what people like of in terms of protecting property instead of citizens. Like
Correct.
he is there to be like, well, we got to keep this area safe. There's no real worry for the people who live there. So there, I mean, that's what I'm saying. There could be kernels of like genuine like thought put into this beyond this will look good in 3D and don't these action scenes look good. But that other stuff is there, and it seems to be centered more. Like when I think about movies like RoboCop or Starship Troopers, those are movies, same director, Paul Verhoeven, but like he is giving you like excessive violence and big shiny things, but it is like there's a point to it. There is like a clear through line of what commentary is being made, and it feels like it lands, as opposed to this one where I'm like, I still and I guess in those movies too, people still could be like, no, that was just cool action and not get the point. This one just felt like it was too soft on the like Anderson stuff for me to believe that it was like, oh, like this is exactly what he's trying to say. And it also, like, I never read the comics, and I can't tell. I know the comics are British and they're like, it could be that Grand Theft Auto thing of like just British people being like, look at how stupid Americans are and violent they are. And I don't know if that's the end of the commentary for them, like, or if it is deeper than that. In which case, I don't know if this movie in particular is just like, well, no, like we'll just be as gritty and violent as the comics, or if there was like some thought of like, well, no, like we need to make sure that people know that Dredd is wrong as well.
Yeah, because in this movie, the only sense of compassion I really have in I guess immersion to character is Anderson. The only character I care about in this movie is Anderson, aside from Mama, which I'm like, hey, for all you Game of Thrones fans, you get to watch Cersei die in this movie very graphically, and that was disturbing. I forgot that's how they killed her. I'm like,
well, how did they do it? They threw her off the building.
They threw her off the building with the slow-mo, which is what Mama does, and that's not a different thing. That's not what it is. It's just they show you the impact of her hitting the ground and what that looks like, and you're just like, holy shit. It's like that is just such an insane part, and I'm just like, and then that scene too is absurd to me because it's like that final scene is very, very interesting to me because Dredd says, I shouldn't say final scene, but that scene where he kills Mama is very interesting because he says he basically gambles the entire peach tree on the fact of how far the range is on that device. That's it. He gambles the whole thing. He's like, this is not a negotiation. Judgment's been passed already. You're going to die. And then she tells him, hey, I've got this nuke like attached to my heartbeat. You can't do anything. He throws her off anyways with the slow-mo. And it's just like, you gambled the entire Peachtree residency on your need to pass judgment. It was completely disregarding everything there. And I'm just like, in that situation where he had her basically, there was an out of the building, like the lockdown had been lifted and all that kind of stuff. There could have been a different way to deal with it, arguably. But to me, the disregard for life was best exemplified by Dredd just being like, no, fuck you. I'm going to gamble whether or not there's a range limit on your radar and gamble all of the lives of Peachtree. That's it. I'm like, that's where the disregard.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was a gamble. I think it's just him being like, well, no, I'm here to kill you. I'm going to kill you.
Right. But then,
and I think that again is me being like, is this movie trying to highlight that it isn't for him? It isn't about saving people. He's just there to execute. Like they told you, go get rid of her, and he's like, now I can get rid of her. I don't give a fuck about everyone else here.
Yeah, that's very much law enforcement.
But that's what I'm saying. Like I don't get it because as you describe that, people could just be like, well, no, he's just a badass, that like he didn't let that worry him. He just knew that he had a job to do and he got it done.
Yeah.
Whereas I think we both see it as like, what the hell? Like, you could just kill everybody there
Yeah.
for this one person.
Yeah. That's
There's
exactly
no attempt to like there's no, as you said, like they could have left, so there's no like attempt to evacuate the building first or anything like that. You're just like, yeah, I'm here, judgment has been passed, I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah.
And I get that's the point of character, is that she's judge, jury, and executioner.
Yeah.
So there is no like, oh, we're arresting you and we're gonna take you to court and then we'll see what happens. It's like, nope, like we've already decided you're guilty and that means we can kill you.
So
But
it's because it's one of those things where at that point in time, and this is why I'm like, does Anderson soften him up that much? Because it's one of those things where it's just like, if like my expectation would have been, okay, cool, we don't need to kill you this way, but what we could do is pump you full of slow-mo in one of those prison cubes that they keep talking about, so it feels like your sentence is for infinity. Like that to me would have been like, oh, okay, so you're finding a way around, but you're punishing her and you're going to kill her, condemn her to this situation, and you're going to make it worse. Like that to me would have been like, whoa, she kind of did get through to him, because he's taking into account all the other people in that residence, which is a shit ton. And like that would have been, to me, I'm like, that would have been better, because at that point, Mama's gang was all taken out. She's the only one left, and she only has the bomb. And if the idea there, if you're willing to gamble on range, then make sure that you can get other people in support you too, and all that kind of stuff. She's already caught. She didn't need to do that. And to me, a lot of people, if they were going like, oh yeah, he's just a badass, that's what he'll do, I'm like, yeah, that's reckless. It's bullshit. It's a dumb move. Why?
That's what I'm saying. We understand it to be that Anderson is the actual hero of the story. Yes. But I don't know if the movie wants that to be the actual takeaway, as opposed to just like, well, she's just not built for it, and there's only one Dredd, and he's the one that can get the job done.
I feel this movie is definite fan service towards fans of the original, to be like, hey, you guys want more Judge Dredd in a modern day like cinematography style? We'll give you exactly that, but we also have to tell a compelling story, but we're gonna back off the compelling story when it.
I don't know how compelling it is. Like you said you liked Mama. She was like a non-factor to me. I didn't even remember how she died until you said that.
I like
any of that stuff.
So here's the thing. I really like Lena Headey or Headley or whatever. I like her as an actress a lot, because it, like, when an actress or an actor can make you feel compelling hate towards a character like Cersei, then you're like, oh man, this is awesome. So I was more, like, the character of Mama herself, not that interesting, because all Mama is okay, you got the backstory, you muscled your way through everything, and you've taken over, and now you're the boss. That's a very straightforward story. There's not a lot of like room for interpretation or whatever it is, and the way she acts throughout the entire movie is just like, yeah, she's clearly the villain, but the payoff here is people that hate her character as Cersei or whatever do get that payoff to see her die.
I think she's completely. I think she is a good actor. But she's not doing a good job in this, and nothing about it is like Cersei to me. So I don't. For me, it doesn't. It's not connected. Like, oh, good, I get to watch Cersei die. It's more just like, oh, okay, yeah. I find her such a flat character in this, and I don't know if that comes down to the director, like, or the editing that just cut out what she was doing.
I just think it comes down to the character herself and the motivations and how one-dimensional the motivation is. That's it. She just wants power. This
is the thing, is that the movie, I don't know like what it is right now, because if this movie is just, it's just these two judges against a whole basically city in apartment style, because it's obviously comically big, like nothing like that would exist realistically, but like if that's the whole thing, then yeah, you don't need her to have that much motivation or backstory. You just need to know that she was strong enough to fight off the other two gang like lords, and she runs everything now, and everyone's afraid of her. But like, if the movie is, I don't know, it just seems like that that character suffers from being the part they couldn't really dig into. And so it's not that interesting of a villain. Like, yeah, she just doesn't register to me as anything.
No, she's not an interesting villain. She's not someone that's like, she's not someone that's like, hey, I'm doing this because all these judges are corrupt and this whole system is corrupt, and I'm taking this for Peachtree to liberate Peachtree from this kind of oppression. That would be a compelling character. This is not a character that's like that. This is a character that's like, I want to fuck shit up. I want power, and I want the monopoly on slow-mo, and that's it. It's a very straightforward gun, violent, power, gang control thing. That's it.
Does Anderson ever go into her head? Because I thought it was interesting when she did that to the Wood Harris character, Kay.
I would say that was one of my favorite scenes.
I thought that was interesting, but like, does she do that to Mama?
No, not that I can remember.
Yeah, I even if she did, and people think we're idiots, I think it's a problem that we don't remember that, but we remember her going into Kay's head. I think that's a failing of the movie, because like that seems to be something interesting to do. Like Judge Dredd has the one mode, he's just gonna shoot you. Like that's what he's got going for you. So to not use that setup, I mean, maybe they did waste it by just using it on Kay. But like, I liked seeing that, and it is a different dynamic because it's a man versus a woman. So like, there's that part where it's like he's sexualizing her, and she's like, "You're not like that. Doesn't disturb me." Like, yeah, you're just a fucking idiot. Like, and then like
shock factor out of the first time. That like, come on.
She freaks him out. Like, I like that, and it was like, oh, like, shouldn't that happen again? But with Mama, like the actual villain.
Yeah. And to me, like, but you're right, it should have. But I asked myself, like, what would the point be, in the sense where it's very clear that she needs to die. The judgment has been passed already. Like, it's
because you could still, because it's still, it is to change up what's happening. The point of that would be like, if you think Mama just is like, she's just a like brute force, putting Anderson in her head, and that she can't just easily do what she did to Kay or something like that. Like, it's even if it's nothing to do with Mama being a better character, it's another hurdle for Anderson to get over that maybe shakes her even more, and like shows her mental for like her commitment to it, like that she can get over something like being in Mama's head.
So you know what I would have liked instead is if Dredd was not involved in the final showdown. That gunshot that he took, I would have liked if that slowed him down enough so that Anderson had to have the final showdown with Mama. In the sense where that would have been so much more compelling to me, because I would have liked to see, and this is just me wishful thinking, the same dialogue with Mama to Anderson's like, I have this heartbeat. Do you like that whole thing of like, do you think I'd be that stupid to realize I would never get caught? Like, that's a really good line, like to do that. It's like, this is my contingency plan. And I would have liked to see what Anderson would have done instead of what Dredd would have done. Because to me, the cool thing is, going off what you said with Wood Harris's character Kay, in that scene where she just like psychologically fucks him up. Like, he's so confident. He's like, oh, my mind's way more fucked up than you. Like, he goes mute completely after that whole thing. He's mouthy. He's like whatever during the time that he's like caught and like detained and all that kind of stuff. But after she does that mind fuck thing with him, he's just completely like, he's not there. He's not a factor anymore until he gets back with Mama. So to me, I'm like, okay, I would have liked to see Anderson pull off the extent of her abilities and see if she can fuck with Mama's brain so bad that she's just wiped out. Like, that her brain doesn't exist, that she's trapped in like a jail cell in her brain, but her heartbeat's still going, keeping the Peachtree residents safe. Like, that to me would have been like amazing. And then Dredd would have been like, not bad, kid, or whatever.
And he can still shoot all the people he wants.
Exactly.
Like, if that's what they need to have happen.
Yeah.
So it's not that he's taken out of the final thing. It's just he is doing the brute force. She's doing the mental stuff, and that makes it more of an even thing.
It makes it more of an even thing. But what it also does a lot better is it makes it makes Anderson's final like, oh yeah, I know I failed. Here's my badge. I'm not doing this anymore. It makes it so much better. It makes that scene, because at that point you would be like, Dredd, you can kind of
I actually disagree. If she
Really?
did that and then said, "And now I'm gone," it would be like, "But you already see what value you would bring to this and how you can do things differently."
But I
Whereas,
don't like the point where it's like, no, I know what I can do, but at the same
but
time,
what
I
I'm
can't.
saying is, in this way, she's edged out of being able to effectively change anything, and she's like, "Yeah, I don't want to be a part of this." So it actually makes more
Oh, I see what
sense that she's leaving because she's like, "Yeah, I don't fit into this." So it
you.
would be weirder if you saw how she fits in and how she can actually make a positive change, and then she's like, "Oh, no, I don't want to do it."
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. You're you're very, very correct about that. Actually, that's a good point. I guess my thing would have been just a better use of Anderson's character in the final scene.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, if she does that, then it makes more sense for her to stay. But since she didn't, I understand why she would leave,
That's
and
fair.
we as an audience can feel better about her leaving
Yeah,
because it's clear she can't have any positive effect in this structure.
correct, correct. Um, yeah, yeah, very good points. But I mean, you're right. For them to only use that one telepathic thing like sparingly, it was, I think, a missed opportunity. I
Mhm.
think just because that was really, really cool. That whole scene where she's in Kay's
Yeah,
mind
it
and like,
feels like a different movie. Like it feels like you feel like, oh, this is like the promise of what's to come later, like how
mm,
she's actually gonna like do stuff in this movie, and then it's like, no. And again, maybe she does do it. I don't know. I just don't remember. I
but
like
honestly, at that point in the movie, I don't think it happens. I can't
okay.
remember whether or not it happens. I just don't think it does because it, I'm more convinced by that time that there's no further judgment that can be passed, and that it's just a one track motivation. So to me, it's like, who does it? Is it Dredd's method, which, yeah, of course it is, or is it Anderson's method? Um, and obviously they went with Dredd because I guess they went with. But that's the only way they could have wrote it, where Anderson leaving makes sense. So we got what we got.
Mhm.
But I would have liked to see what Anderson could have done, because
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing would have been Dredd realizing, oh, I don't have to kill. I can just psychologically get her to fuck with people's minds and all that kind of stuff, and then the
Yeah.
death toll fine. But not that that's his concern or whatever, because obviously we're putting a theoretical world where the world's so overpopulated that life itself is disposable, right?
But is that what I think it's just he doesn't care.
Well, that's what I mean.
I
It
don't
just
know that it's
feels like that.
overpopulated. All I know is he doesn't care, and
But of course,
I get that that is a realistic thing for
mhm,
cops in general, but like I I just don't know like what the movie wants to accomplish because
neither do I.
as we discussed this, like yeah, like she leaves and it would have been nice if she could have done all this stuff, and it seems like they're setting it up for her to do all this stuff, but they're like, but it wouldn't make sense if she had a positive effect and still left. It seemed like the movie was so committed to her leaving.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's like, oh, okay. But then like, so then what's the point of this then? Like
Yeah.
just to like reiterate how shit it is to be judge, jury, and executioner.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? If the movie did result in her staying on the force, how would that have affected your perception of this movie, or would it have?
Like
If she
was
decides to
able
stay
to
on the
do
force,
the if she was able to do the mind stuff and be like, oh, this is how I can help, and then I'm
and
staying.
and to further soften up Dredd, do you think it would have been a great evolution of this franchise? Because as far as like from what I know with this franchise, it's one judge that does everything. It's not like, oh, it's now mandated that you have two judges towards each case to have that, right? Like if that was, oh, we have a new mandate now, we're doing it better because of this person. And I'm like, that would have been kind of cool to see an evolution in that whole system, that structure, in that world. But the reality is, this movie serves no other purpose than to just show us gratuitous violence in an action film. Which, I mean, if for people that it works for, good for you. I'm like, I'm happy for you, but very much like the Punisher, this is just something that I don't think is for me.
Yeah, I think it could be for me because unlike the Punisher, I actually see where I fit in this in terms of Anderson and being like, well, these are still people. You can't just like steamroll them.
Sure.
I don't remember what your question was. All I know is I don't really care one way or the other if she stays. It's just I want to know what the like, and it's not up to like that's not like I'm saying this is the question this movie has to answer or else it's bad. It's just it feels mixed. It
Oh yeah.
doesn't feel like it's committed to anything other than the violence.
Yes.
And then it's sprinkled in some commentary that I feel like it needs to go further with.
Yeah. It's a half committed effort into being like, hey, let's talk about this, baby. But but let's not fully talk about this. It's a weird way of handling these kind of topics and issues and all that kind of stuff. And inevitably these topics and issues always come up in law enforcement judgment movies where that's the whole point. You have to kind of show where the assessment critical thinking is in regards to that. What makes this person a criminal and what makes this person a judge. And I think the interesting thing is at some point in time, there is even dialogue that I half remember between Kay's character and the judges, where he kind of goes into talking about Dredd. He says something like, "Oh, I'm reading this off Wikipedia. Dredd goes around literally judging and killing people if they do wrong. Anyone who goes against the system might end up the bad guy." So I think Kay has justified fighting that in his mind. That's Wood Harris interpreting what Kay is and his the motivations for his character.
Sorry, say that again. What?
So Harris says, Wood Harris, who is the actor for Kay, has said, Dredd goes around literally judging and killing people if they do wrong. Anyone who goes against the system might end up the bad guy. So I think Kay has justified fighting that in his mind. So I think Wood Harris is saying that Kay's character is fighting the judges and what they stand for and what they represent. But I don't get that from his character. Do you?
No.
Yeah, I don't. I think he's just a cog.
What?
In my
this movie doesn't feel like it cared about the characters. So yeah, I feel like a lot of stuff probably got cut or like not thought of in service of cool action scenes.
Yeah, to think that a lot of it got cut in an hour and 30 minute change is in this day and age like a little bit odd because now we're used to like movies going 2-3 hours as normal, right? So
yeah, like this movie doesn't need to be longer.
No, it doesn't.
It could have been if they wanted to focus on more important things, but yeah, like I think everyone is against the judges in this world. It didn't seem like that was like unique to Kay. Also, yeah, as you said, I don't really know what he wanted out of it other than he was a drug dealer and then he was like, oh, I'm caught, like, but like I mean, I don't know what Wood Harris signed up to do. Like maybe he had a more complicated character because he's got a lot of screen time for someone who's just basically like a cog in the system. In movies, usually that character gets more of an arc.
Yes,
there's some kind of element of maybe you start rooting for them at some point.
Yeah,
as a black person, I'm rooting for him to not die, but I'm also not like that interested in like I don't really care what he's doing other than like this movie doesn't also care about him. Like
yeah, I mean like for him to say that in an interview is just like, and I hope that maybe there was a scene where that was displayed a little bit better, but obviously it didn't make the final cut. Because I think that element of what Wood Harris says is interesting. The idea of this totalitarian state where Dredd is judge, jury, and executioner and passes judgment without question. There's no due process. There's nothing, and everything's punishable law by death immediately, or like whatever. Like those are the options. Like you either get 5 years or you get death immediately, and depending on what you're gonna do or say, I'm just gonna pull the trigger. Like that to me is interesting. It's like how do you question that system? And to me, the presence of Anderson would have been a good introduction to challenge that system a little
Yeah,
bit
like if
more.
him and Anderson teamed up
Mhm.
and like, yeah, I don't know.
I think because the thing is, I think this movie is just confused as to what it's trying to achieve because you can see little seeds planted throughout the entire movie of like maybe they'll talk about this, maybe they'll talk, but none of it gets done in the for a preferred violent kind of cinematography storytelling instead of actually going into deep structures and understanding these things. I think that would have made this movie so much more compelling if what Wood Harris said is actually being addressed in the movie. I don't think any of that is the case whatsoever. It's not like what would have been interesting is like, okay, Mama's controlling Peachtree, and the Peachtree residents themselves go like, yeah, you can save us, you can't save us from Mama, like all this kind of stuff. Your system's broken, it doesn't work here. Like that to me is very, very interesting, for why Peachtree it doesn't work, and the judges and all that kind of stuff, right? But none of that gets paid off, really, to me at least.
No, not really. I mean,
Yep.
I didn't remember it ending with just Judge Dredd being like, well, she passed, and then her walking away. I thought for sure she was still like a part of the force at the end of it. It just seemed like they were like, it's done, good. We killed the bad guy. It's done now. We don't need to think about it anymore. And I guess this movie didn't do well because it didn't get a sequel. But like my memory was that everyone really enjoyed this movie, which I understand. Seeing it in theaters, it's a very fun movie. It's a very fun theater experience.
And I
And
think that is one of the key takeaways from this, and a lot of films from this era that were pushing the 3D thing a lot more because it was very gimmicky around that period of time, right? Like I can definitely tell you that in this movie, watching it at home and not knowing the relevancy of that period of time when they were trying to push 3D technology and movie theater going experiences so much more and trying to put that as a center of storytelling. This movie does that pretty well in the sense where I can't remember my experience watching this in theaters, but I can definitely tell that this was one of the first movies that didn't make it feel like it was a layer on from a layer further back and all that kind of stuff. Kind of like how the 3D Alice in Wonderland with Johnny Depp was. It made me feel like here's one plane of existence and here's one, like we're putting it 5 meters back and it just looks weird. This does look a lot better, but when you're stuck watching it from a home theater experience, it loses that appeal to me anyways.
yeah,
So
it's fine. I
it's a
think it's
trend
fine
of
when
the storytelling of that era, I guess. And to think of what is this movie? 2012. Oh my
yeah, you
God.
keep saying that era, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good time for movies.
That era. Oh my God. For someone that still thinks of the 90s as like 2 years ago, I
But
have
I
a
think
really
that's the thing is this movie wants to like be a 90s movie.
Yes.
Which is fine. I don't. That's not a knock to it. I think it wants to be like late 80s, 90s action movie.
Yep.
And I think it accomplishes that. I just think that it also flirts with these other ideas and then leaves me like, well, so then what are we actually like doing here?
Yeah. I think it's a complicated issue with a lot of storytelling beats where it's like, okay, let's take these original IPs and try to put them in the real world, but still give the original fans enough fan service so that works for them. To me, it's like two different types of storytelling where they're not committed to either one.
Because I think like while I don't think it's a clean analog, I think you're right about them being like, all right, it'll be like Training Day to the extent that it's like new person and seasoned vet. I mean, obviously, the difference there is that Training Day isn't trying to be ambiguous about whether or not Denzel Washington's a bad guy. He just is the bad guy. So it's interesting thing there is the bad guy is trying to like train the new person, which isn't the case here. But I understand that they probably saw that as like, we're gonna do Judge Dredd like meets Training Day meets the Raid. So that I understood. Like that part makes sense. It's just the Raid is just like, I know there is more to it than just the fighting, but like they really hung their hat on like, look at this amazing fight choreography for the first Raid, which this movie is so clearly influenced by. And then for Training Day, that was character beats. Like they cared about the characters in that movie. So it just doesn't feel as and I think this comes from both of us not really having any attachment to Judge Dredd as a comic book character or from the 90s. Like, because I get the sense that people who probably were disappointed by Sylvester Stallone taking off his helmet in the 90s version and being more of like a superstar, like star driven movie, they might have really dug into the fact that like Carl Urban never takes his helmet off and he stays true to the character, and like maybe that's what works for them. But I'm like, but I just don't know this character. I don't know like what I'm supposed to get from him. It's
also I don't get much from this character. All it really, really seems like is that we're just glorifying crime and the role of law enforcement. That's all it seems to be doing to me.
Well, it's glorifying law enforcement, not crime. I don't think it's glorifying crime.
Okay, well, glorifying is not the right word. You're right, exaggerating. It's basically putting us in a scenario where it's just like so the scenarios are so exaggerated that it's just like, oh, we can justify understanding why we need judge, jury, and executioner too in this world and all that kind of stuff, right? It gets to that degree, but none of that system is challenged. None of it gets better. It's all like, no,
because she leaves it. She just was like, oh yeah, I don't want to do this. But also, yeah, I don't. You're right that the movie wants you to be like, this is why they need to be the way they are, but I don't know that it actually earns that. Like at no point do I'm like, oh yeah, this makes sense that they would do it this way.
I don't believe that it earns it.
Especially since it's like, well, this building you left alone for so long. So like, if this system was that effective, this building never would have got to this point.
Exactly. And it also, the thing about this too is, okay, if you're trying to convince me that all of Peachtree is this corrupt, then it wouldn't just be all on Mama and all that kind of stuff, right?
Well, I mean, it isn't all on Mama. That's the thing, is that she's got judges on the take, so
right.
She's got backing.
She's got a lot going on and all that kind of stuff. I get that, but I don't know. It's just the movie doesn't successfully show me how corrupt this entire Peachtree society is to justify the need for that extreme level of judge, jury, and executioner being sent right away, and then body bags being sent away to clean up. Like that, like none of that like is a thing. But also at the same time, I don't think I'm ever going to understand that perspective of, oh, everything's gotten that bad where we have to suspend our due diligence.
Again, I wasn't really paying attention, but my sense is that they were sent there to take out a puppet that wasn't doing what they wanted anymore. So no, they weren't being sent there to like fix things. They were like, oh, our little puppet got out of hand, we need to get rid of her. And that's what Judge Dredd is being sent there to do.
Fair enough.
So it is, the whole thing is corrupt, but when you do that, then it's like, well, what judgment is being made by the audience then to be like, well, this is bad, because Judge Dredd is still part of that system. It's not like he leaves at the end, just Anderson. So like, that's where I'm saying it's confusing, because the whole point is that everything is corrupt and fucked, and you wouldn't be able to save the day being a part of that, because the only reason they're there is because they plant, not even if they didn't plant her, they work with her now, and they saw benefit in having her do what she was doing in that building. And then for whatever reason, that wasn't working out for them anymore. Now they need to go to get rid of her. But then you would think the logical thing after that is Judge Dredd being like, what the hell? Like, why were we in cahoots with her? This is shitty. I'm out. Or I'm going to kill all of you now. But
Yeah.
like,
that would have been cool. It's like, oh, law enforcement,
but he's just like, oh yeah,
pass judgment on everyone now. Like that would have been like, oh, okay, now we have Dredd unhinged. Now it's Dredd against the world. That seems crazy cool. Like I'd be on board with that because I'm like, at that point, from a storytelling perspective, you're just doubling down on no. We just want to set the stage for like a really violent thing, and that's all we want to do. And I'm like, okay, at least you're being honest about that. But and don't get me wrong, I don't think that this movie is being dishonest about. We want to showcase the visuals and the cinematography more than anything else. I think it's being very upfront about that, but it's one foot out the door with every other thing. Interesting thing about this movie is it's disappointing because I was like, oh, you could definitely, that's a very interesting story beat. No, you chose violence instead. That's an interesting story. No, you chose this instead. That's all. Everything
it was one of the movies where I was like, oh, this isn't holding up for me. That's too bad.
Yeah. And the one thing I would say about this is that, oh, okay, cool. What this movie does really, really well is like, oh, okay, it makes me feel like this is exactly what a video game would look like in real life, because that's how absurd it is. Like the kill counts and like the weapon cycling and like looting guns and all that kind of stuff. A lot of that is like, okay, it does that job very, very, very successfully, better than most other films of this genre would do. But that's what it made me feel like. It's just like knowing that Dredd is not a video game, or Judge Dredd was not based on a video game. That to me is a little bit weird, that it's like, okay, this does a better successful job of convincing me of this is what a video game would be like in real life, as opposed to video game movies that are based entirely off video games. And it's like, oh, this is not at all what it would look like. It's weird, but it does that part very, very well. I'm glad that people that like that stuff get to enjoy it. But at this point in my life, it might be a little bit too gratuitous for myself to enjoy.
Yep. Well, having said all that, let's rate it.
Yep.
I don't know. It's a 5. Okay.
Yeah, it's a 5.
I think what works about it is the violent nature of it and how well that would probably work for people. And I see the kernels of ideas, like even that idea of like, if you were Brit, like I think the director's like South Africa. I don't know what the director is, but like, if you were a different country looking at the States, you would be like, well, yeah, they always set up these, like they plant like the dictators and stuff in countries, and then when they get out of hand, they go in and save the country from the person they planted in there. Like you could see that, but they don't really lean into that. It doesn't. And then the hero of the story is still like, and I'll still keep working for it. So then you're like, okay, but maybe that's still part of the commentary, is that even American heroes are still part of a shit system. So I don't know.
And the interesting, while you were saying that, the director, Pete Travis, he is from Salford, Greater Manchester, England. So yeah,
he is British. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm reading one part of this that is very, very interesting. That a lot of people, there was some criticism here on the Wikipedia page saying that the critical response is that like a lot of the British elements were taken away from this. And I was like, that's interesting. So was this director purposely making this for an American audience? Or like,
I would imagine. I think it just got confusing because I think when you have that separate, I mean, not that like England has any ground to stand on in terms of morality on invading other countries and doing what they want to do.
Boom. Yep.
But like, I can see them still being like, well, this is the story we want to tell, and this is the criticism we want to highlight, and we're going to use Americans. But yeah, that was Dredd.
That is Dredd.
Did not work for me the way I thought it would, but I see the merit in the movie. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for listening, everybody. As Ben said, we're part of the That Shelf Podcast Network. That means we are at the same home as Bad Game Movies, Black Hole Films, Changing Reels, Composers, Nose Budget Nightmares. What a great theme song, and more. So please head on over there. If you'd like to hear older episodes of Spoiled Rotten, you can go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. You'll see our backlog of episodes. You can also talk to us on Twitter at TDF Spoiled. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Radio Public, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, a whole bunch of things. So please go there. I can't stress enough. Please rate and review us. That would be a nice thing. And share it with your friends. See what they think of what we think and what you think of us.
Yeah, for Judge Dredd fans, let us know what we're missing from this. But
yeah, sure. Or
glad
don't. I don't really
hope
care.
you guys like it, because that's I'm just glad that because it seems like Judge Dredd fans really, really enjoy this. So I'm glad that you guys got the character in the movie that you guys wanted. It's just,
or did you? I don't know that that's a fact.
But one thing I will say is I will be committed to watching the original and then probably making some comment some point down the road at an obscure episode. So points to the person that can find that on Twitter.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Bye, everybody.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.